I think that especially for us non-technical people, we don't understand even that this world exists. Like there's a version of this that I probably could have built without AI technically like 8 years ago using Zapier, right? Like this most of this stuff is workflow related. And so I just wasn't a developer to do it,
Yeah, that's why every good marketer should have a developer best friend to do all the things that we don't even know we could do.
which we have now with
Yes.
Claude.
Welcome to the AI powered inbox, where we share top tips, use cases, and news at the intersection of AI and email marketing. I'm your host. My name is Adam Bianco, the founder and chief strategist at Off Trail Marketing. With me on today's show is Michael Roberts, fractional lifecycle and an email leader who owns his own practice, Boost My Email. Michael, welcome to the show.
Awesome, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining. Today's episode is all about n8n and how Michael used it to streamline building an email workflow. If you aren't familiar with n8n, this is for you. If you are familiar with it, then you're in a good spot to see a great example of how Michael's using it to save several hours every week. But before we get into all of that, Michael, just tell us about your background and how you got into some of the fractional work.
Yeah. So as far as email marketing goes, I actually fell into it by accident. Started out of college. It was not my intention to get in here. I actually was hoping to get into like SEO or some other web stuff. But back in college, went to a career fair, found somebody who was looking for a digital marketing person, an internship. I was like, great, that would be me. They brought me on, and instead of doing what I thought was the digital marketing, they said, hey, here's an instance of Eloqua. We don't have anything built out. You need to go figure it out. Upload a bunch of lists. We need to send some emails. That's how I got introduced to it all. And that's essentially been the career path that has led me to where I'm at now. So building a whole Eloquent instance from nothing for a company called Franklin Covey that does professional development. From there, I moved over to a company called Cloud App that's now called Zeit. They are a Loom competitor. And by the end of my time there, had actually gone up to head of demand and leading most of the marketing function. When I left, I was laid off as a part of a 10% reduction there at the beginning of a lot of the tech layoffs post COVID, and was able to ride a lot of the sympathy in the early days of people seeing that, which I had always been interested in contractor work, freelancing, that sort of life, particularly not wanting to step into marketing leadership roles and what they have to deal with. And so the fractional route was my path to career growth, and the layoff was the trigger that pushed me into it. I didn't really have the courage to do it myself. So getting laid off pushed me into it, gave it a try, tried to figure out how long I could extend my runway, and I'm still extending runway. So,
Yeah, sometimes that forcing function
yeah.
pushes us to do something very different than maybe what we thought we'd be. I know for me that's similar. There was a forcing function and similar, like run my own practice and now host a podcast. But it's funny you mentioned. I feel like so many people that have been on the podcast and myself included started in something else or an aspect of marketing, and we've found our way into this niche of email and lifecycle marketing, because there's, I think now, or for a while, people get the entry point into it from social media, for example, and then they kind of slowly work their way up and realize there's other disciplines out there where there is SEO or email or anything else. And then at some point we become almost generalists and then niche back down, and here we are as email lifecycle people.
Yeah, that's what actually I found out when I went fractional. I was started fractional in broader demand, found that I just did better work on the lower level, higher quality work, more efficient, that kind of stuff. And so I tightened it down to email and lifecycle. So
Yeah, and now you're working on all these automated workflows and leveraging n8n to do it. And I think everyone's at this point where we're starting to get more mature about AI. We're starting to figure it out, and different people have dabbled into tools like Zapier and n8n. And now you see examples like you have. You posted in Email Geek Slack channel. So if those that aren't familiar with it, it's a great community to join. You'll see all types of information about your like ESP or tools, how to use tips of how to use AI and job boards and all that stuff. So if you aren't familiar, Email Geeks, get on it if you are probably listening to this. And you shared a workflow that you've been working on for a while. So tell us about that and what I guess prompted it.
So the idea behind it came out of a little bit of frustration of not knowing what to do with AI, particularly in a sense where I felt like I was differentiated between anybody else. So I'm most of the use cases I come across of are rather underwhelming to me. Anything email related is usually outbound personalization focused, and that's not my niche. Like I'm focused more on marketing campaigns at the brand level. So you're looking at like events, conversion campaigns, PLG stuff. Nothing I found tended to seem like it would help what I do. And anything else that was close was what everybody else was doing, which was either content generation or research. Both decently important. I don't want to knock on those, but everybody does. They're the easiest to understand, which means if everybody's doing them, your ability to get ahead or do something different is lower, right? You just don't have the same impact. And with all the talk of agents, this idea of having some kind of digital employee was interesting to me, but there's so much nuanced work in the work that we do that I would get down on the development. Like I would run into stop, like I get stopped or have barriers or whatever, even thinking of the idea, because I'd get this point where it's like I have to make a decision on what's best, and I wouldn't trust AI to do it. Something as simple as an example of like if I'm building a campaign and making sure that the page I'm sending people to is the right page. Well, AI could know if the page loads or not or fails, but it wouldn't understand from a kind of concept view if that's the one I really wanted, right? And so that's where I was having a lot of frustration. And so as I took a step back and trying to figure out what I could build one around, I landed on trying to keep it really simple and identify steps within my work that required no judgment at all. And the task that made the most sense was content creation in terms of actual placement in the ESP. So most of my clients use HubSpot, and in a lot of scenarios, my clients have writers or a content team that's doing their thing, and half the time they ship all the copy over to me to get into HubSpot so that I can do the workflows, the segmentation, and build the actual email. Well, in that case, I'm just like this machine that's taking copy, the subject line, paste it into HubSpot, preview text, paste, banner, paste, all this stuff. There's no judgment. And if I get a campaign of like 6 emails, it's a lot of tedious work to just get that in there. And there are APIs out there that will do that for you, or at least give you the access to do it. I'm not a developer. I don't know any code, any of that kind of thing. But assuming that I could figure it out with AI, I went down this road of like, how can I figure out a way that if I have a document with all the approved copy, I essentially hit a button and it, boom, appears in HubSpot, ready for me to QA, attach a segment, and send. So that was what I was trying to pursue.
There's so many elements to what we do as lifecycle marketers, and a lot of it is sometimes strategy based or developing the segmentation and what have you. But a good chunk of it is oftentimes just like the execution, the X's and O's, the copying and pasting the copy itself into the email, making sure everything's in the right place. And that's where you spend a large bulk of the time. And to your point, it can be, especially when you have multiple emails, really tedious, but really important. And that's where AI can come in and leave judgment out of it. Because we've seen that AI over time, it depends on the model, depending on the time you're doing it, there's sometimes a big range. So sometimes it's best, hey, don't use judgment, just execute this action, which it's usually much better at, much cleaner.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I think, the first, as we figure it out, judgment workflows might come later down the road once we get comfortable with maybe technology making decisions that we wouldn't make, but we're going to roll with it anyways. Because not all the decisions are wrong. They're just like not as good. But for now, it's got to be like a black and white thing. It's like, was it done correctly or not? Those are the kinds of tasks I'm trying to offload from me so I can just focus or spend my time on the stuff that is nuanced.
Yeah. That makes sense. Well, let's get a peek of what that looks like. Let's see, like an example of maybe one of the emails that you put together, a little bit of the finished product. We'll get a sneak peek to the end, and then let's take a look at also the workflow you're building.
Okay. I want to show the messiness of this a little bit because I think it's going to help highlight how I got here. It was a messy process to get there, and now that I'm there, it's easier to work with. But I want to show the messiness and how even in the messiness, it's better than what it was before. Uh, and the reason for this is because the principles that I'm going to talk through in building the workflow, I think are far more important than the actual literal steps because part of it, it took me a while to build it. And the reason it took me a while to build it is there were like 1,000 ways to build it. And I didn't know which way to go. And still, it's not like all of those different ways are even better or worse than the other. There's just 100 ways to do it. So, for example, bef- uh, when I'm trying to create this, this is one of my clients' name is Ambrook. They are an accounting software specialized for operators in particularly agriculture. And there's an event coming up, and this would be an email that like I get from say like the event team, and they have all the copy ready. They put together the whole campaign, right? Like I didn't build the event. So they built the event, they have the whole campaign ready, then they ship over my portion that I'm supposed to execute, which includes a lot of the copy. And so when you look at like the document here, here's the copy that I get, right? And I've added a couple of things, like they just send me the image, so I make sure the image is uploaded, but they give me the webinar registration link. I have all this copy. And what I'm hoping, right, is that this turns into this. And on the note of ways to do this, there was a while where I was trying to use Claude Code to write scripts within my local machine here that would do the same thing using APIs. That's totally possible. I got it to actually, it was successful. And what that would kind of look like is this folder structure here where I had these tools and these like scripts. Honestly, I had AI help me build them and organize them. What I found though is like it was very overwhelming for me, especially as a non-developer. And as I would build and try these out, with, I had my whole agency thing. It started creating all these files. It got really messy. There were things in here that I didn't know why they existed that it was creating, which gave me a lot of uncertainty in what the future looked like. And as I continued to build emails, things started to mess up more consistently. Like and I couldn't understand how to fix them. So a developer minded person might find that that route's the better way to go. For a less technical person like myself, using something like n8n, which is simply a workflow tool with a lot of like integrations already built into it, with similar to something like Make or Zapier. This felt easier for me to tackle because I know how I work in canvases like this every day. And so having a familiar interface for me to work, and in fact, I actually started using n8n a while ago because the difference between it and Zapier and Make is there's an open source version of this. So I was using this in a different workflow at like really massive scale that would have given me like a 6-figure sort of cost in Zapier if I were to run the same thing.
And if people that are more familiar with Zapier, this is something that, as you mentioned, very similar, connecting all different types of tools together. But Zapier, from what I've seen, is starts adding up quickly, to your point, in terms of like
Right.
price and cost. And for someone who's running their own shop or working at a small business, like you're not gonna be able to pay that cost over time because all of a sudden you get a surprise bill and from Zapier. And so n8n is a natural the solution for that, as well as like this is a nice canvas. This is something, as you mentioned, like we look at this type of stuff in our ESPs probably every single day.
Mhm.
So this is something that seems to be really familiar.
Yeah, and the caveat is that since it's open source, if you want to uh, beat the whole cost thing, you're running it on your own servers, right? Making sure the updates are there, the infrastructure on the back end, that kind of thing. It's not crazy. Does probably require a little bit of engineering help to make sure that all the security stuff that they want to set up and blah blah blah. But then once it's there, I can run this at much more efficient rates than, n8n has a cloud version too, like hosted version that would have pricing similar to what Zapier and Make might do. But if you're running super massive scale, that's where this sort of shines. So ironically, what we're showing today is not massive scale. I'm just running I might run this maybe a few times a day, depending on the workload of emails that I have to create. But it's something that's familiar and there's a lot of flexibility to it. So I'm confident this same workflow, which is why I'm coming back to the principles are more important than the actual workflow, even though we'll dive into the specifics to kind of help give context. The principles are more important because what can be done here, I'm 100% can be done in Zapier, can be done in Make, can be done using Claude Code, writing your scripts. Again, hundreds of ways to get this done.
Taking a step back, The problem you're trying to solve is you get several of these emails, not on a weekly basis, and going from to the point where everything's pretty much ready to go. You just need to plug it into HubSpot or just an ESP of your choice.
Yeah.
You're saying, all right, I'm going to build this workflow to streamline this from like a Google Doc into HubSpot within moments and doing this at scale since you have many of them and ended
Right.
up going on n8n to streamline that process.
Yep. And at face value with a single email, it might not feel like a massive lift, right? Because I'm very, you're probably super familiar with the ESP you're using, and so it's like, okay, I can copy and paste each of these in and do that in, like, if I'm focused, not getting distracted by my phone and blah blah, which I think is a real piece of this, right? Like if I have a workflow do it, it's not getting distracted. But let's say I don't get distracted either. I can do this in several minutes, right? That's not that big of a deal. Inevitably, though, when I copy and paste things over, there's a few things that break. Maybe the font or colors gets kind of wonky. When I actually paste this copy into the email template, what looks good here, I didn't like the look of it here, so I need to do some formatting. Little things like that can add up. And so at a baseline, like as I make all those finishing touches on things that I didn't anticipate, let's say it takes me 10 minutes to make sure I copy all this in and that it is working the way I want, right? I can do it faster than that, but we're going to give ourselves some grace here and say it takes me 10 minutes per email. When I run this through my workflow, which we'll do here in a second, takes 20 seconds, if that. Where then the savings really add up is what I send into multiple emails within a campaign. If I get 6 of these, that's where the time really starts adding up, because then I have to clone each one of these, rename it, then put in the content. I'm sorting through all the different documents of approved copy on the other side. And because of the tedious nature of it, the odds of distraction increase a lot, right?
Yeah.
Slack messages, if you're working from home, stuff that pops up, all of that can add up. And then before you know it, you're not taking 10 minutes. But it takes a little bit longer because all of a sudden it's like some urgent message popped up. You didn't get to it and you have to like come back, revisit where you were. You don't remember how much content you pasted in and so forth.
And that's where things get tricky because if you do have, say, 6 versions of this thing, then you also have to do much more QA to make sure that wires aren't getting crossed, version 5 isn't
Yep.
bleeding into version 1.
Yep.
And especially if you get, as you said, like distracted along the way, or you get pulled into something else, trying to find exactly where your spot was. You're like, "Wait, am I at number 3? Am I at number 5? Where am I at? Or are all of these links correct? They should go to like slightly different Luma events and things like that."
Yeah. So like, just think about like what we're saving here. Like we always like to pitch this in terms of time savings because I think that's like the easiest to understand. There's so many other aspects of how this helps in those regards, right? Like the cognitive load of the experience that you're just talking about. Like if I can essentially relieve my mind knowing that if I have 6 emails in this doc and I have my machine create them for me, and it's because there's no judgment, it will succeed every time if I've done the pre-work to set it up, which is the messiness I'll talk about here in a second. That is such a huge lift, right? Because then I come to my draft, the image is there, the content's so formatted, the CTAs work. Like I'm just doing a final check, right? I come here, I do my preview, I make sure it's everything where I want it to go, and I'm good. Um, that's a really, really big lift that I think goes beyond just like, hey, we moved from 10 minutes down to 60 seconds for this build.
Right. Right. I bet. So let's take a look at that workflow. If you don't mind, like let's jump into N8N. Let's walk through what those steps are, what the icons mean. Again, for folks that aren't familiar with N8N, this is gonna look new. Um, so talk us through a little bit of what everything is and how you built it and what your kind of considerations were in place as you were putting this together.
Yeah. So a lot of the talk in the world right now is these like AI agents, like these little employees that will just do your bidding and figure it out yourselves, right? I'm have yet to successfully build one of those, admittedly. And because of the judgment stuff that I've talked about. So this is a lot more workflow focused than it is AI, what I would consider AI agent focused, right? Where AI did help me is developing all of the code and things necessary to make it work, right? Starting into this, I didn't really know how to use or structure JSON to send email content in payloads that HubSpot could understand. I had no idea how to do that. So using Claude to like develop it with me, put it in these steps, test it, get the errors back. That's how this all formulated. And as it would fail or it would only partially succeed, then that would give me the direction of like how I need to fix the workflow. So I'm showing the most recent successful execution. We're going to run one legitimately here in a second. But what I wanted to be able to do is take this, copy the whole thing, come back to n8n. You can see here there's this chat node. It's at the start here. I wanted to be able to paste this and for it to work out.
Okay.
So the
And as you
one,
do that, do you mind like walking us through a little bit of, or maybe you're getting to this in general, but walking us through like, what do these icons mean? What's just the general structure as we then go into the, like, let's run it?
yeah, the overall flow is that if in plain language, I'm giving this workflow the content. It is understanding the content and what goes where. So it's reading this email and noticing what the subject line is, what the preview text is, what the banner image is, what the body content is. You'll notice here too, like I have some things labeled. I don't have the body labeled, right? And that's important because as I take this stuff and paste it into this workflow, this is the one AI step. You can see that there's a model attached here. I wanted it to be smart enough that I could give it whatever people sent me and it would work. And so an AI model will look at this content and it will craft all of the individual parts that are necessary to build this out, right? You need a subject line, you need a preview text, you need this banner, you need this content, you need a URL for the CTA, you need the CTA language, so forth. Understands all of that. And then it'll spit it out. Now, this next step here is a JavaScript step. Again, I don't know JavaScript, but
That's where Claude comes in.
that's where
Claude
Claude
knows
comes
it
in.
really well.
And I didn't know that that's what I needed at the beforehand. Right? I didn't come into this and okay, now I need JavaScript to do this. I just knew the outcome that I needed. And so what happened is where I got to this step is I was testing, where'd my content go? I was testing actually a multi-email threaded thing, right? So I had like 4 emails. I was like, okay, does this machine, will it create 4 unique emails in HubSpot if I run this? And first time I run it through, it didn't. You can notice on this execution, there's one item that goes throughout all this whole workflow. Well, at somewhere along the lines, when we're updating things in HubSpot, I need individual items. Like I need different emails for each one. So if I give it 4 emails and it understands it as one document, somewhere along the way, it needs to parse it out into 4 documents. So that's what this code does. The AI model identifies every email and it just spits it out basically in text. And then this JavaScript code, you can see here, looks at it and it takes it all and separates each email into what's called an array, basically kind of like a list of separate emails that then it can upload into HubSpot separately. And in order to do that, you have to loop things so it does it one at a time. So that's what this little step here does. At this point, you would see 6 items that get to this loop step, and then it runs through one by one each loop to create emails in HubSpot. I'll get into these individual things here in a second, but it goes through the loop one by one until it's all done, and then we're finished.
All right. So we essentially, if I understand this correctly, we take the email, which, or a Google Doc, which could have multiple emails within it. Step 2 is like just making sure AI understands it. It's breaking apart into various pieces that can then be fed into the system,
Yep.
JavaScript and things like that. And you have along the way, sounds like that, like a third and fourth spot is going to be doing a critical check, which is this one email? Is this multiple emails? And if it's more than one, we're going to break it apart and therefore creating multiple things. And the entire seems like loop is making sure it is doing that check of if it's multiple emails, make sure it's separated out into an individual email. Is
Well,
that
it's
right?
just how it processes it,
Yeah,
right? So it can't do it all at once. And there's multiple reasons to do loops. Some technical ones I don't understand. Like, for example, sometimes it depends on like the scale you're doing things, but sometimes you want loops because there's limits on how fast you can pump content in through APIs, right? There's limits there. Sometimes it's the nature of these nodes and how it runs its thing. And so loops are just helpful because it just creates these groups. And the whole like if it's multiple emails is done in these two steps. At this point, it already knows whether there are or not. It's just taking however many emails it gets and then processing them one at a time afterwards.
makes sense. And so you've leveraged AI to not only parse the email in step two, but then after that, you said there's no real AI involved. It is just doing actual functions. And you shared like what a developer might do. But of course, like you're not a developer, you're not necessarily like a technical marketer, but that's where AI has come in almost indirectly to help you write that JavaScript that you've used in step three and other steps. So it's leveraging that, but plugging it into the system where, as you mentioned, it's not necessarily judgment, it's more just processing.
Yes. Yep. So if you so like this step here, we'll pull up for me. This API endpoint right here clones emails, right? Which means there's the body here. Let's see if it'll pull it up for me. Yeah. So you can see the body here, and this little ID here is the template that we're cloning. And you notice like there's a bunch of this other crap in here. I put that in there because I was getting errors where things were breaking down in terms of like JSON payloads have when they're shipped through APIs have got to be structured correctly. And if they don't, they just don't work. Well, I don't know how the structure works. So inevitably, I'm putting like a random apostrophe in the wrong place. Like that happens with email copy a lot. Like you'll get errors because you're trying to send all the punctuation. Well, punctuation changes like the syntax and code of what you're sending over. And so if you don't account for that, it will error out. And so I needed AI to help me sort through those errors. And that's part of the messy process, right? Like trying to ship stuff that I've never done before, getting errors back. Like when you look at this, the output here shows a successful output. Many times I'd have like this red X here, and then it would give me all of the error information that I would then copy, paste back into Claude and be like, this happened. What was it? And it would be like, oh, it's because you're not doing this, right? And that back and forth happens a lot because admittedly, AI models don't think through all of that. They understand how to fix it, but they don't think about it when you're in the build mode. And so it takes several iterations of failure to work out all those kinks.
Yeah, I think anyone who's leveraged Claude to do or ChatGPT or whatever to do some of the like the coding or anything like there's gonna be a little bit of trial and error in the process to figure out what works or some edge cases not accounting for. I know I've used Claude relatively extensively when it comes to some complex liquid logic, for example. And then it's all it is essentially coding, but it's not taking in all the various edge cases or things that I may know based off of segmentation or
Yeah.
attributes. And there's some trial and error along the way until you gets it just right.
So when I clone the email, what's really important in this case, and it's going to be different for every ESP. So let me talk through like the literal kind of messy. This was the most important part of it. Took me the most time to figure out, and it's going to be different for every email provider. So in HubSpot case, when you have like this is in their drag and drop editor, every element in this has a unique identifier. And I actually can't see that from this window. Like I can't figure out what that identifier is. So I have a template almost exactly like this, and which is the one in n8n that we're copying here. And so when we clone it, you'll see that the output here has these, and it's like these module IDs. And these module IDs are they're the building blocks of that email. And it's on me to know which one is which, because if I'm trying to clone a HubSpot email like this, if I don't match up everything exactly right, including like the formatting of the clone, when it goes to update the content, it'll all break. Again, I figured that out the hard way. I thought I had this all I figured out. put it together. It gave me a success message. I came to it and I had a blank email window.
Yeah,
I was like,
not a
where
success.
did all my content go? And that's, part of the process. So in HubSpot's case, if you're doing it this way, that's something you have to do. If you're building off of just a straight HTML file and you're just putting content into that HTML, it might be easier to deal with. You're just dealing with that one file. But this is how HubSpot works. So every ESP is going to be different. So in order for that to work, I had to go in, I had to take this, I used AI to help me figure it out, but I'd take this output of the cloned email, I would give it a screenshot of the email too and be like, this is what the email looks like. Tell me which every module, what the ID is and what it maps to. And then what that means then is I can use JavaScript to take the arrays, the output of the emails, and map them to the correct modules for HubSpot, right? So you can see the whole list here. Basically, this is just the map and in kind of a comment, but the code does that. It's building, and what I mean by patch is the update API call to switch out the content here, okay? And so when I've got that all mapped, then I have this step, which is another API call that uses the cloned email that we just created, gets the patch payload from the previous step, so I don't have to write a bunch of code in here. It was actually really nice. AI suggested it. I had built other flows where I put in the whole update of the code in this, and it was a little more brittle. This seemed to be more effective. Again, trial and error. And then this patch request, you can see success. It uploads all of it, and it's got all the details of every module mapped so that it does it right. And then again, it would just loop. So if we actually run it as an example, now I'm going to purposefully keep this messy because what's going to happen is the template I'm going to use in this flow doesn't match up intentionally with this Outlook, okay? I have a different template where the banner is a little further down. There's a header in this other template. And so it will mismatch a teeny bit, but I want to show how that's the case and how it's important to kind of map where things go. And two, how even when you're trying to figure it out, you might get a result that's still better than where you are today, right? So if I just take this and I just copy the whole thing and paste it into this, you'll see here that it took the message. Now AI is looking at it, it's reading it, it's deciding what all the parts are. See, is that fast? That was less than 10 seconds.
That's a lot. That's impressive. A lot
So
of time.
went through the whole thing. So now if I come back to, I'm going to stop sharing for just a second. Let me come back to here and pull up the new email.
All right, so yeah, you plugged it in. Let's see the result. But
Okay.
for foreshadowing that the fact that it's intentionally might be a little off.
Yeah. And then the fixes would be relatively. Okay, so here's the one I just created. I've got it so that it has the right naming convention. It knows when I want to send it. The 9th is when the email is. And again, so it actually took the date from the webinar and put it in the naming convention. You'll see here, doesn't match directly to this because like I told you, it recognized the H1, which in the other template I have. And the banner in this other template is a little bit lower because this particular template that I'm giving you here is more of like a PLG feature walkthrough. So a lot of times we put GIFs in here. But just look example how quickly it is, even with this where it's broken and the things are just out of order a little bit. It takes me 10 seconds to finish going like that.
And how does it know your stylings and colors, fonts, and all of that?
That's all the pre-work that's done when you're building, when you take this, right? So if you look at, when you clone your template, so what you have to do beforehand, you would do this, say like an HTML file, right? You get the whole design. So in this sense, it's like the background, let's come here, this background is this 6C color type thing, or this FCF one, right? The borders are this C, the body color, all of paragraphs and headings and fonts and what we want the links to be. Those are all preset. Well, when I clone, it does all that. So you can see this background color matches right here. That FCF is right there,
Yeah, so
right?
essentially you're setting it all in the template that you want, and then the workflow is just cloning that template and plugging everything in.
Well, the way this works is I had to be more literal. So it's not like smart finding, like in this example, and we might get to a point where I can do that. Which is again another lesson in terms of being okay with something that might not be what you envisioned it would be. Like, right? There's probably a better version of this where I can, at the beginning, just have the list of templates. Like, there's 4 of them, right? And the whole workflow will just smartly understand which one I selected and apply all of the settings correct. This is a little more literal. Like, in these payloads and how I structured this, I told it that we have to keep all of this the same. And so the dynamic nature of the payload is taking all of those styling and all the literal values that it got from the clone and just using those. So it's not smartly thinking about it. Does that make sense? It's just literally taking it.
Yeah, that makes sense. In this all as you're talking through this, as you're showing the different steps, I feel like you're selling yourself short here a little bit, 'cause this feels fairly technical. Whether it's super technical or not, I guess for folks that are like look at this and listen to this and their maybe eyes glaze over a little bit, or they just feel like kind of intimidated. Any kind of words of advice of just how to, I don't know, get started, or just really just dive in instead of being like, whoa, like I don't even know what's going on.
Yeah, let me try and come up with advice on the fly because I honestly don't. I presented on something similar to this 2 months ago, 3 months ago now, at a conference, and I expected that session to be like pumped. People seeing the potential of where this can go, how much time you can save, or the cognitive load, and to your what you said, like eyes glazed over, like deer in the headlights kind of look is what I got.
Hmm.
Right, like very unsure of what to even do with themselves after seeing it. There was a little bit of excitement, but it was more of like, now what? And I think that, especially for us non technical people, we don't understand even that this world exists. Like, there's a version of this that I probably could have built without AI, technically, like 8 years ago using Zapier, right? Like, most of this stuff is workflow related.
Yeah.
And so I just wasn't a developer to do it,
Yeah. That's why every good marketer should have a developer best friend to do all the things that we don't even know we could do.
which we have now with
Yes.
Claude or OpenAI or whatever you want to use. We
Hmm.
have that now. And so as long as you get the right system access and permissions and that kind of thing, we now have access to create this kind of stuff. The problem is our own ignorance is getting in the way. And so you have to find some forcing functions and use cases that might work. And you have to take a ton of time, like a significant amount of time to test and see if it will work or not. This whole like local terminal, like I was using the terminal, which looks very intimidating if you use it for the first time because it's all black and white and like it's all cody looking. It took me months to sort through how that didn't work, like 2 or 3 months of working on it pretty consistently. And so I think we are kind of innovating. And even though this stuff has already been done, there's this bridge now where executors like you and myself, and just email marketers in general that are non technical, but know all of the nuance in campaign planning. There's this bridge over how do I use technical tools to accomplish a lot of the work that I don't really need my brain to get done. That bridge is where it's very cloudy and messy right now, but there are a couple of lanes that feel clear to me that are better than nothing. This is one of them. The other major one that I see is like mass personalization at scale. So, like, if you're building an automated campaign, you could run workflows that look at each individual customer's data and rewrite emails individually for each one. That's one other lane that I think there's a lot of opportunity in. Otherwise, I'm not sure. Like, we got to test and dig in the mud and try and figure out and make a lot of mistakes along the
Right.
way to get there.
I think like half the battle is, to your point, figuring out where to or figuring out how to use AI and the use cases for it and point it to a certain problem you're trying to solve. And hopefully discussions like this and the rest of the podcast and a whole bunch of other stuff out there help give ideas for folks. But I'm
Yeah,
also a
so let
firm
me just
believer.
pitch out one idea just as an illustrator with something I haven't built yet, but it seemed kind of interesting. Could I take a campaign planning doc, right, that outlines the principles of the segments that I want to build and just feed that campaign doc into something like this that understands every database field within my email service provider. So at the contact level, at the company level, at the deal level, and then understanding all of those fields, understand who we want to build, like what the best segment is for that, and then just auto build it in a far more comprehensive way, right? Like just think about like if you're building a geographic campaign and you've got it's only for the Western US and you've got 15 states that you got to do. Well, you could pull state fields. There's probably multiple state fields on the contact record because your data is messy. There's probably multiple state fields on the company records. You might even have some on the deal records. Who knows?
Oh, yeah.
Choosing ever, and you have the nuance and wherewithal of like knowing which ones you use most of the time. But my guess is that like you know which ones are most reliable, so you kind of shortcut and you don't worry about the edge cases. Well, how cool would it be to just fit it into some kind of workflow that builds segments instantly that cover all of the edge cases, right? 2% of your database they have the state code instead of the state name, and so they always get missed. But a workflow or AI tool builds a total comprehensive segment, so you get all those extras, right? That feels interesting. I don't know if it's possible. There's a lot of nuance in database quality that where it might not work, but that could be really interesting because I spend a lot of time building segments. And if I could, there's a little bit of judgment involved in there. If I get to a point where I'm confident that a machine can do that for me and be more comprehensive than I am me because I just don't want to get all the little edge cases, then that's a big win. So
Yeah, especially because we are focused on those main segments that may cover 90%
yeah,
of our audience.
yeah,
And we could probably do those when we're creating segments. Things you might be able to create those in minutes.
yeah.
But when you start going into that last 10%, all those various edge cases, you could take hours putting together and find the right combo. So if you have a tool or workflow, whatever it is, to streamline that and to do that within moments, at least to get mostly accurate or an educated guess, then that saves exponential amount of time.
Yeah. Yep. So those are the possibilities you got to start thinking through, right? Like, are there things that I'm building and you'll find more success in these early days in non-judgment oriented tasks.
Right. It's I saw a post the other day and I feel like it's accurate. If you try to use AI unsuccessfully a couple of months ago on something, like try again now or try again in a couple of months because the models change so often. I've returned to various tasks and now that I tried to earlier in the year and it's like it's so much better at it. Doesn't mean it's perfect or things I'm struggling with now. All right, let's see if Claude is better at it in a few months.
Yeah, that's also the overwhelming piece of it is that if you have to switch your system every 2 months because something better came out, that's another overwhelming piece of this. So I actually haven't figured out a balance of that because the last thing I can do is like if we're spending all of our time just building something to do the work and never doing the work, then we're not getting anywhere. And so in my experience is exactly what you said. I actually started with n8n, went to the terminal hoping it would be better. For me, it ended up not being so, at least for my experience. So I went back to n8n and now I'm in a good spot. I have this workflow for every one of my clients, several different templates, and I'm able to like, when I get requests, I can turn those out easy and I go back to campaign planning, right? So
Yeah. So what has reception been like with your clients since have you let them, I know big things like have you let them know you're doing this? And then if so, what have they thought?
So they know just at a level that like I have these workflows. So they know in a sense that I have created API keys that I need to use. It's on my own hosted system, which means that I needed to make sure that the scopes for the APIs didn't touch any customer data, right? So like in the horrific event that any of this stuff was exposed, which again, another layer of things that you have to learn, there's no risk in customer data being touched because the scopes weren't there. So they know in that sense that I was kind of building stuff because I wanted to make sure they were aware. But otherwise, for them, they just care on quality work, how I get that done. They don't know the nuance. In fact, maybe they watch this and see how it's done and they'll see it for the first time. which is fine. What they care about more is like output and quality and making sure that I'm getting what they need out of our database, right? And so I've talked about it, not like the specific nuances, but they hopefully just feel like, oh, wow, like Michael's able to like churn out if he's keeping up with the campaign load pretty easy because, well, I don't know why, but I'm happy with it. That's probably
Yeah.
hopefully the feeling, right? So,
Just keep the clients happy, do good
yeah,
work, and they'll move on to all the million other things they have to do.
yep.
Yeah, nice. Well, you're at this now, like, where do you wanna take it? How is it evolving, and what's next?
I'm trying to see if it's worth an offer to teach people how to do it. And, I don't think I'll build a course. I have a whole article on my website that has like the individual code of each step and basically the transcript of this podcast, more or less, that you could go read. The big vision is like if there is a world where AI agents replace my job and I don't have anything, I want to be one of the first ones to figure out how it's done. Because I don't see a lot of people talking about the real specifics, right, on stuff like this. Most of the stuff, but I know people are doing it. So it's like people are building some of these things, they're just not sharing it as much.
Right.
And I've had a couple conversations with people that have done it with like Cloud Code and whatever. So I'm trying to own the conversation a little bit more around building it and figuring out where that path is to replacing myself. If I can't replace myself, well, I want to be the one that figures that out too, and which parts can be and which parts can't be. Right. So that's kind of the vision. I don't know in terms of like a business scale for myself, like where that's going to end up. I do feel like there's opportunity. I just don't know what lane yet is the right way to take it. So for now, it's just execution for the most part, right? Just execution that like I'm just creating better outcomes for the companies that I'm doing work for.
Yeah, we're all in the process of figuring this out in real time, and some people are doing it behind closed doors. Some people are doing it out in the open on podcasts such as this. If you do want more information about the kind of the step by step guide, we'll link to that from Michael. We'll link to that in the show notes. So if you're listening or watching, definitely check that out, and we'll send you over to that step by step guide. Michael, anything else before we move on to the lightning round questions?
No,
All right, good stuff. Okay, so what lightning round questions? So a few questions before we get you out of here. What trend, and this could be, I guess, AI related or maybe non AI related, what trend do you think is overrated or underrated?
I've been on a kick this year that I'm like not as big of a fan on A/B testing.
Interesting. Say
Yeah,
more.
I work for smallish companies, and so I don't know about you. Maybe I'm just bad at A/B testing, but I'd say 90% of the A/B tests I've run had no statistical significance. And so if I'm running all these tests to get these like teeny incremental increases that 90% of the time I can't prove that they actually did at like a statistical level, feels like a little bit of a waste, right? Like that's not going to cut it. Like my clients want to see big differences. And so I hold myself a little bit to that standard. And so I try and avoid dumb little copy changes or things like that that I just don't feel like are going to make a huge difference. There is a whole world on the whole like thousands of small improvements lift like the whole thing. I believe in that too. In a small company, I guess that it's a hard world for me to live in and justify my output. And so I'm a little cooler on the whole A/B testing thing. I try and find bigger fish to fry.
Yeah, that's fair. I think there's two elements to it in play, and one, as you called out, is the audience size. When I worked with like a smaller nonprofit, we would have to run an A/B test for months. It wasn't something that we would do on like a one send,
Yeah,
or wasn't something we would do for a couple weeks or a month. We would have to do it for months just to get enough traffic through, and then you hope that the change would be substantial enough. And oftentimes
yeah,
small copy changes, a copy change to a CTA button or even a subject line isn't significant enough to move the needle, especially with smaller audiences. I would agree with you, especially for the size of the company. For smaller companies, likely you can spend that energy elsewhere. And at some point, you trust what the best practices tell you, what your gut tells you to a certain degree of what you think might be the best option.
and my other thing I'll add to that is like, let's say you do get a statistical difference. I would wager most people when they do, they don't know how to take that and use it for the next time. What are you going to do? Right? Especially if it's a copy change. Like you had two different subject lines for some event coming up. One statistically outperform the other. You're not going to you're not going to directly copy and use that every single time. That's just not how the world works. And so I think we have a hard time, particularly again, the smaller you go, the more so, the less sophisticated your data modeling and stuff can be because you just don't have the time. Where the smaller you go, it's just not worth the time and effort. And you don't have the capacity to take what you learned from it and make a difference for every campaign that comes after it. So
Yeah.
there's a lot. I would imagine there's a lot of people that disagree with that. I kind of hope I'm every time I brought that up, there's a couple people that are like, you're just excusing a non-data based way of working and whatever.
You know what? We're here for the hot takes. That's what's there for. And I think just to add to it, A/B tests shouldn't generally operate in a vacuum. You should have a bit of a roadmap of what you're trying to learn.
Yeah.
All right, two last questions. Just a couple last questions, so we'll get you out. You are based in Utah. You're based in Salt Lake City. Do you have a favorite national park out of the Big Five?
Bryce Canyon
Why
is
Bryce?
it's the most jaw dropping when you like roll up to it. I think. Yeah, you don't see it coming. You when you drive in, you're just kind of in this like high altitude sort of mountain plain, and then you got to go through the trees, and then bam, there's all these hoodoos below you, and it's like wild.
Yeah,
So
we
I'd
uh,
say
we
Bryce.
loved. We were in Utah a couple years ago. Loved Bryce. So +1 on Bryce. Any current favorites or binges? TV shows, podcasts, books, you name it.
I should probably read more. I don't. A little bit of confession. My wife and I had not watched any of the Stranger Things until like a few months ago. Like we
I was
legit
You're
hadn't.
behind by about like a decade when the
Yeah,
first one came
yeah.
out.
It was actually really impressive. We hadn't seen it all, any of them, and so we started when either the beginning of the year, somewhere around the beginning of the year, maybe, and finished like a month and a half ago or 2 months ago. But we're able to. We timed it with that fifth season or whatever, so we were able to like roll in and finish it like right as kind of it was ending and do the whole thing all at once, which is kind of
Okay,
cool.
so what'd you think? Was
It's
it
great.
worth?
Yeah, I mean, we never got tired of it. We're pretty easy to please. We're not much critics, so we loved it.
Sometimes it's better to not be part of the Twitter
Yeah,
ecosystem
we just
burst of just everyone's going to find something to pick at and complain about, especially when there's 3 years in between
yeah,
in
we're
between
we're
seasons.
we're peasants when it comes to critics on movies and stuff. We just are there for a good time.
Nice. All right, so last random one. If you were to do something else besides marketing, I'm putting you on the spot. What would it
Man,
be?
the list is way too big. I'm actually hopefully the way I'm building my business right now is to get out of it, not because I hate it, but because I want to do so many different things. Obviously, there's a lot of music stuff up here. That could be one. I picked up tennis in the last year and I've loved it. I'd love to get more in that scene if there was a way. I love the outdoors. I am into sports. So I've got like a bunch of like card collecting sort of stuff going on.
Nice.
And I was actually building like a tabletop fantasy sports game for a while that I'm like kind of mulling over. There's tons of stuff.
You got yeah, you you are in line. There's a long list. All fun
Yeah.
stuff, it seems like.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun stuff. My wife and I actually met doing like youth camp counseling stuff through like church stuff too. There would be we would, if I were to do anything with her, we'd crush it at like summer youth camp type things. It would be awesome. Like that could be my job from like
Yeah.
end of May to September, just every week running some kind of camp thing. That would be
Yeah.
cool too.
The best. I was a former summer camp counselor. The best times are
Yep.
out in the woods, hanging out with just hanging out with people outside and
Yep.
having fun.
Yep.
Can't beat it. All right, Michael. Let's get you out of here. Where can we follow you?
LinkedIn's best. Just find me on LinkedIn, post almost every day. Please engage with me there, message me. That's the best spot.
Okay. Well, Michael Roberts of Boost My Emails. Thanks so much for joining and thanks for listening for everyone who's stuck around. If you liked it, please leave us a review and tell a colleague, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining.
Thanks.